Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises and honor and glory to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai Bahashim, Rechak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders in Great Millstone who well. Peace and mercy to the Tazadak Akim out there that's laboring this truth with all sincerity. I want to say Shalom. All right, today's topic, is going into the book of Psalms, the 41st chapter, the 9th verse. All right, the topic is going into, I'm going to start it off with, going into being prepared of betrayal, from people that are close to you. Okay, have that in your mind. Since we're in the last days of the last days, things are, happening rapidly. All right, so have in your mind that the people that may be very close to you can end up betraying you. Just like a great example when I bring out Psalms, the 41st chapter, King David, as well as ultimately to Yahweh Shah, So I want to get the book of Romans, chapter 15, verse 4. So it says, "For whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope." So the things that were written in these scriptures were written for our learning. Okay, so the examples I'm going to use are written for us to learn from. So when I say that be prepared that, someone close to you is going to betray you, all right, having in your mind, it happened to great men in the scriptures, all right? So let me get this. This is the book of Micah, chapter 7. Salakia. All right, verse 5. "Trust ye not in a friend, put ye not confidence in a guide, keep the doors of thy mouth from her that layeth in thy bosom." So trust ye not in a friend. All right, not saying don't trust brothers or people around you. Just have it in your mind, right? As things get worse and tribulation really starts to occur, you really can't put trust into people that you was close with. All right, because these same people could turn around and turn against you, especially really those who don't believe in the truth, who don't really follow the faith. They may know that they're a Hebrew Israelite, but they don't really subscribe to it. Their lifestyles hasn't changed. They're not renewed in their mind. Okay, so especially those people who may hang out in the world, even your parents, you have to keep in mind that it's a good chance that they could betray you. Not saying everybody's parents is going to betray them and things of that nature, but just don't be surprised because the scriptures speak about it. All right. So it says, verse 6, "For the son dishonoreth the father, the daughter rise up against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and man's house," it says, "a man's enemies are the men of his own house," or starts there. Okay? So your enemy could be your woman. Your enemy could be your children. If brothers have children, And let's bring out the scriptures now. Let's bring it a beautiful point. Going back up Romans, the 15th chapter, the scriptures are written for our learning. So this is the book of Psalms, chapter 41, verse 9. It says, "Yeah, my own familiar friend in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, had lifted up his heel against me." Now, this is a twofold meaning. All right. Now, who was King David referring to? Ahithophel. I'm Salaki if I'm saying his name wrong. So let me get that scripture. And we're going to dissect that verse. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 15. All right, verse 12. And this also proves what, as well as Absalom. Absalom is King David's son who turned against him. So brothers who have children, don't be surprised that if your children turn against you, it happened to King David. All right. So it says, 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 12, "And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gileonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices, and the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. All right, and Ahithophel, all right, was David's close counselor. Okay, and I actually went into like Gileonite, because the scriptures always go into like an Ephraite and things like that. So a Gileonite is just a person who was from that ancient city. So I just wanted to get that point too. So the term Gileonite refers to an inhabitant of the ancient city of Gilo, a town in the hill country of Judah. Okay, so going into like even like a Ephraite, it was a city in Bethlehem. All right, so it's the same concept. A Gileonite, was a town in Gilo. All right, which was in a town in Judah. So we could say safely that he was a Judite. So going back, it says Ahithophel is introduced in the Bible as a trusted advisor to King David. His wisdom and counsel were highly esteemed, as noted in 2 Samuel 16-23. So let's get that real quick. So in the 2 Samuel chapter 16 verse 23, and the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was as if a man had inquired at the oracle of the Most High. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. Yeah, and it just shows you too. And he was a close advisor, close counsel to King David, and he betrayed him. All right, he conspired with Absalom to bring King David down. All right. So going back to the scriptures, let's go back to Psalms 41. Because this is a double meaning too. All right. So this is Psalms 41, verse 9. It says, yeah, my own familiar friend, which we brought that out. All right. That familiar friend was Ahithophel, along with his son Absalom. All right. But also this is a foreshadowing of Judas betraying Yahushua. And we're going to bring that out as well. It says, which did eat of my bread. All right, so it says, which did, let me read it again. Which did eat of my bread. So now I went, all right, because that was an ancient custom. So in ancient times, eating bread together represented unity, friendship, and hospitality, often solidifying agreements or covenants. All right, it says, represents friendship and unity. All right, built in trust. Sharing a meal was a way to show goodwill and non-hostility. Sharing bread with the enemy, for example, was a gesture of peace for the time. Forming bonds. All right. A shared meal was a way to build and reinforce a connection between people, moving beyond superficial interactions to a deeper, more authentic relationship. All right. It says covenant meals. Eating together was a part of the process of making an agreement or covenant, making the bond official and binding the shared meal. All right. And as it goes, it says the act of breaking bread is an essential theme, famously associated with the Last Supper, which symbolized Yahushua's body and sacrifice. Sharing a meal in early Christian communities was a way to practice unity and fellowship and faith. All right. So, yeah, just representing that, so, they had a close bond. All right. Which did eat of his bread, showing, they had, King David showed hospitality to his close advisor. He had, a friendship towards him. All right. And it says, have lifted up his heel against me, which represents betrayal, because, your heel is behind your foot, so it representing a betrayal. Okay. Now, Ahithophel, all right, he ended up, he ended up hanging himself. And let me get that in Second Samuel, the 17th chapter, okay? Because Judas also after he betrayed Yahweh Shah, he ended up killing himself. I think it's let me see. Salakia. Hang himself. I know it's in 2 Samuel. Yep. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 17, verse 23. And when Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his ass and arose and got him home to his house, to his city, and put his household in order, and hanged himself and died and was buried in the sepulchre of his father. All right. So he ended up, killing himself. All right. Later down after he betrayed King David. Okay. So now let's get John the 13th chapter, because this is also referring to Judas betraying Yahweh Shah, as Yahweh Shah quoted that in John the 13th chapter of Psalms, the 41st chapter. He quoted it. All right. Yep. So this is John chapter 13, verse 18, and this is Yahweh Shah speaking. I speak not of you all, I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture may be fulfilled, going back to Psalms 41 and 9, right? He that eateth bread with me have lifted up his heel against me, all right? Which representing Judas, betraying Yahweh Shah, okay? And we could go into that in Matthew 26. Let's bring that out. All right, this is Matthew chapter 26. All right, let's start from verse 25, because as Google talked about how the bread represented Yahweh Shah's body, as it says and in his sacrifice. So it says, then Judas betrayed him. Matter of fact, I'm gonna restart from verse 23. It says, and he answered, and this is Matthew 26 and 23. And he answered and said, he that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same shall betray me. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It have been good for that man if he have not been born. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, is it I, he said unto him, thou hast said? And as they were eating, right, because this was in the Last Supper, right? As they were eating, Yahweh Shah took bread and blessed it and break it, going into showing you that bread was an essential part of a feast, which bread in ancient times represented friendship, unity, a covenant agreement. Okay, so it says Yahweh Shah took bread and blessed it and break it and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. So the bread also representing Yahweh Shah's body, Yahweh Shah ultimately being sacrificed, being that perfect sacrifice for the children of Israel, okay, being that lamb without blemish, okay. And then when you go even deeper, it goes into the the sufferings that Yahweh Shah went through, okay. So that's what that's talking about. It says, and he took the cup and gave it thanks and gave it to them, saying, drink ye all of it. It says, for this is my blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. Going into what that cup, that wine represented, represented Yahweh Shah's blood. All right. For the remission of sins. For who? For the Israelites. Okay. Because Yahweh Shah came to, basically be that sacrifice for the children of Israel and no other nation. All right. Matter of fact, it says that in Matthew 1 and 21, he was sent. Let's go get it real quick before we wrap it up. Yep. So this is Matthew 1 and 21. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Yahweh Shah, for he shall save his people from their sins. And his is possessive, because what? Yahweh Shah was a Judite, pursuant to Hebrews, the 7th chapter, the 14th verse. Okay. So he came to save his people, which is the children of Israel, all right, which consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, okay? So going back into the point of Psalms, the 41st chapter, all right, it represented, is a twofold meaning, representing Ahithophel, Absalom betraying King David, as well as a foreshadow of Yahweh Shah being betrayed by Judas, who ultimately, sold Yahweh Shah too out for shekels of silver, and later on, killed himself too, just like King David's close advisor Ahithophel. All right, which the point of this lesson was going into, since Yahweh Shah and King David went through it, particularly Yahweh Shah says the servant is not greater than his master. So we're gonna, we have to expect that could possibly happen to us if that's our lot. All right. So with that, Lord willing, this is edifying. I want to give all praises and honor and glory to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shah. And with that, Shalom.